Hey, everybody, how's it going? This is Seth Williams with the RE Tipster podcast. Today, we've got an interesting conversation lined up with Fede Pomi, co founder and CEO of Fabrica.land. And this is a company I just learned about a few weeks ago. And the idea behind this website is to make it significantly easier to close real estate deals. This is particularly helpful and useful to people who are doing self closings. If you're a land investor, you know exactly what I'm talking about, how slow and time consuming this process can be. It can also be used to assist greatly with seller financing, collecting payments, just handling a lot of the stuff that normally slows up the process and makes it confusing and cumbersome for everybody. So with this software, the idea is to really, like literally allow somebody to close on a transaction from their phone if they so choose in a matter of minutes. And this is possible because each property on this website is transferred into a trust. That's one trust per property. And the trust kind of acts like a container for the title of the property. And when a buyer comes along, they can buy the trust that holds the title, which kind of negates the need for transferring a deed the old fashioned way and finding a notary and waiting for cashier's checks to go through in the mail and all this hassle. When you just sell the trust to them, they become the owner of that property through the trust. And changing the ownership of a trust is something that can be done digitally. And it kind of allows for safe, instant online transactions, which is much easier than handling closings the way we're all accustomed to doing it. And this is something that's pretty new to me, honestly. I haven't done a whole lot of this stuff. And it seemed like a pretty smart way to do this. And also just want to be clear, like the idea with this conversation here is not to be like an advertisement for the company. They're not paying our tipster or anything like that. I just thought it was a super interesting method and a kind of an innovative way to do this. And if it does make the process easier, then I want you all to know about it. So we're going to talk with the CEO and co-founder about how this all works. And to make it even more interesting, we're also talking with Travis King, who is an actual user of the website. And he's done a bit of work in advising for the company, and he's going to give us his input on how the website works and how it's actually been able to implement things in his business. So how are you guys doing? Welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Fede, let's start with you. So if I'm understanding correctly, you were an Italian immigrant. Is that correct?
Yes, that's also pretty easy to spot, I guess. But yes,
yeah,
I'm Italian, and I moved here 7 years ago to California.
Okay, gotcha. Maybe you can just tell us your quick story, like how and why did you end up in California? What was the path that led you here to start dealing with this kind of random problem in the real estate industry?
Absolutely. So, well, I moved here for work. I always worked in the tech space, and I moved to San Francisco. And when I moved there, I bought a house, and I went through the process of like finding your house, which is it's exciting, it's beautiful, and then closing the transaction, which is awful. It was like a terrible experience. And it was like, wow, how is that even possible? I mean, I'm in the place where like technology is everything, and the way the transaction happens is like how it used to happen like 50 years ago. Notaries, fingerprints, deeds, title insurance. What even is title insurance? I mean, it was all very complex. So that was the first sort of like moment. And then a friend of mine told me about the land investing space. And I discovered these super active communities of like people buying and selling thousands of plots of land. I thought, they're going through the very same issue that I felt every single time I do a transaction. It has to be done better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of interesting thing is at first glance it seems like a really niche problem, like this really small land investing community, but it's actually a huge problem. I mean, it's like every real estate transaction is hard like this. This is like the reason title companies and a lot of attorneys exist is just because we've all accepted that like this process is horrible and we have to hire people to deal with it. So it's actually, I can see it being a huge deal if this can somehow translate to other types of real estate. And this is probably an issue in other parts of the world too, right? It's probably not just the US that is a huge hassle like this. Yeah.
Absolutely, Seth. You're totally right. So we picked one one entry point, which are land transactions because they are super active and many of the transactions happen online, but it's a whole industry problem for the real estate in the US and across the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we sort of start this by addressing what this software is and what it isn't. And I was able to do a little demo transaction that you guys were kind enough to set up for me just to experience what it looks like on behalf of a buyer who is buying a property this way. And it is very quick. It's like literally a 5-minute process. Felt super seamless. Um, but it made me wonder a few things like in terms of like title search, due diligence, other things that are correlated to this closing process. Is that what this software aims to help with as well, or is that just something totally different? That's not really what this gets into.
Mhm. So it's a good question. We are making so that transactions can be performed fully online. So we save a ton of time for the land seller and for the buyer. So we're covering more and more of a transaction. We started from the very core of it, which is how you transfer the money and the title, and we're adding pieces to it. So we're adding title search, we added seller financing, we will add property taxes, so that the whole buying and selling and financing experience can be done fully online in a matter of minutes. And you don't have to take care of that complexity of the process
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
we take care of it.
Yeah. So, and I know, like, especially when you're doing a in-house closing on vacant land, which a lot of other types of real estate, like this doesn't even enter their minds. Like they just use title companies. End of story. But I know one of the inherent challenges with doing this with land is kind of this trust issue. You and this other party have to, okay, you send the deed and I'll send the money, or vice versa. And that's one of the problems the title company solves because they're this third party that makes sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. And this software can kind of do a lot of that, right? Because it handles the payment and it shows all the documentation and it kind of lays it all out on the table and it doesn't have this sort of like, okay, you go first and then I'll go. Like it's not really an issue you have to deal with. Am I right with that?
That's right. So we are, in a sense, we are a substitute for a title company. So we address the problem with software in a way that it's more modern. So for the buyer, it's a very easy way to see the property, make sure that it's really the property that he wants or that she wants, and then buy it, just providing the payment and become the owner in a matter of a few minutes. And it doesn't matter who is on the other side really, and the buyer can trust a third party in the deal, and the seller can do the same. So because we are in the middle, making sure that everything is done the correct way, both from a contract perspective and money perspective.
Sure. Gotcha. And I noticed in the payment process, when the buyer makes payment for the property, I had to hook up an ACH connection to a bank account. Um, I know one little, thing that people have been trying to get into and figure out is how to allow payments from credit cards and that kind of thing. Is that something that this software gets into, or not really?
Yes, we do have it on our roadmap. So eventually we will provide also credit card. But the reality is that we have seen that most of our buyers and sellers prefer ACH payments because it's cheaper. So we basically comes with no commissions. We cover the cost for the ACH payment. So you get
Oh, cool.
100% of the money.
Nice.
While with credit cards, of course, you have always some fees embedded in the price.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool. Um, And I know in the test transaction I went through, and by the way, I'm going to, assuming everything comes out okay, I'm going to edit that video. I actually shot a video as I was going through this transaction, and I'm going to put it in the show notes for this episode, which you can find at retipster.com/94, because this is episode 94. So go check that out if you want to see what this looks like. But in the transaction that I went through, I was doing a cash sale. But I did notice you can just as well set up seller finance transactions this way. And I'm actually really curious about that. And maybe Travis, this is something you can answer. So, like, what aspects of the seller financing process can this handle? Like, I assume it can set up automated payments. Like, do you sign land contract documentation, and can you see an amortization schedule? Like, how does that work?
Absolutely, Seth. I can speak to that. So you the the seller financing disposition side of things there's obviously a lot of parts and pieces when you're doing it on your own, right? So like mine prior to implementing Fabrica, I would have, your buy now button, right? Which was essentially a link to a Jot form. People with Stripe integrated, right? So I now have to have a Stripe merchant account. I have a Jot form for my web form. The buyer inputs all their information that's going to end up going to the land contract. They hit submit. We process their doc fee. I then that comes into me, via email, and I now have to, I can merge it and create the documents, but generally sometimes the term length of the loan varies depending on if the buyer can afford more or less per month. So I manually then have to, go back and forth, figure out the term length, and then create the documents, send it out for DocuSign, and get those back, right? And then I set up within my QuickBooks and auto draft,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of, as you know, right, there's a lot of
Yeah.
parts and pieces, even with Zapier, creating Zaps and webhooks and some of the things I had that kind of taped together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I thought was more automated than a lot of people. What Fabrica does is you're loading your property onto their, into your portal or the dashboard, and then they provide you with a checkout link so the buyer can click that link and fill out the information. And the cool thing with Fabrica is so the buyer is going to have essentially a client portal like you would have to a loan on your auto loan or something, right? You have a client portal with an amortization table. Client has the ability to log in, change change account information if they need to, make extra payments, which prior to Fabrica, that was, again, a text or an email I'm fielding,
Mm-hmm.
for people wanting to make an extra payment. Hey, what's my balance? Or, oh, you know, um, a request for anything. What's my balance? I might want to pay it off. What's the payoff? So there's all this back and forth that isn't really a problem when you have 5, 10, 15, 20 loans. But my wife and I, our company, at one point we had 90 loans in our portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're dealing with that on that volume,
Yeah.
having a client portal that they can log into completely eliminates all those emails,
Yeah.
which I call, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're loan servicing, it takes away from doing the other parts of your business. So
Yeah.
having that client portal with the amortization table, the ability to make extra payments, check a balance at any time without my involvement,
Mm-hmm.
that's really what it
Yeah.
it removes. And then on the checkout, I kind of went over my checkout process prior. Fabrica essentially removes me. I do some work on the front end, loading the property, get the link, and then I no longer have to generate those documents because Fabrica generates the land contract
Mm-hmm.
documents,
Yeah.
collects the signature, and then services the loan. And even now they're similar to title company. They're paying property taxes on my behalf, which is another thing when you have a large loan
Yeah.
portfolio, right? Just one less thing that you have to do
Mm-hmm.
when you're servicing loans.
So how does it pay property taxes on your behalf? How does that work?
So what we do is that we take care of paying the property taxes with the county, with the local county
Mhm.
tax assessor. And since we have the relationship with the customer, we simply charge them directly on their bank account.
Mhm.
So when the taxes are due, if the customer wants that service, we have it in beta at the moment.
Mhm.
We essentially take care of everything, and you will have a report that says, okay, you have like 15 properties on Fabrica in these counties. We have paid the property taxes, and this is the amount that is going to be charged on your bank
Mhm.
account, and you have nothing to do.
Gotcha. And the loan instrument, like the loan documents that you're using for this, I mean, I know those vary from state to state. It's not like a static thing you can just use everywhere. So are those loan documents preloaded into Fabrica, or does the user have to provide those, use whatever they want to do, or how does that work?
Now, Seth, we make it extremely easy for our users. So as a seller, as a user, you really just have to type in the amount, the price of a property, the number of the number of months that you want to set up the loan for, the terms essentially, and click on sell. And we automatically generate the document for you with a legal description, and everything is done in the way that it's correct for the state the property is in.
Mhm.
So setting up the property for sale again takes like 5 minutes and you're ready to go.
Mhm. And as I'm thinking through the process, like, um, is it possible to set up some kind of a auto-generated link that could go on your website so a buyer could just show up, click buy, and it happens? Or like, do you have to have some conversation first and then you manually generate the link and send it to them and do it that way?
So the link is generated the moment you put the property for sale. So at the end of a process, you get a link, you use that link and copy and paste it on Facebook, on your website, on Landwatch, wherever you want, and that's it. And if you want, we also provide like a buy now button that you can embed in your website, and it's like a checkout system in a sense.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense because I know when they're going through like that buyer needs to create their own account and enter their own details in there. So it's like they kind of do the work themselves. It's not like you need to be there to manually type it all out, right?
Right.
Yeah, cool.
And let me add one thing. I mean, since you mentioned that this morning you actually bought the test property, I want to share what was like the experience on the other side, because I was the seller for that test property, and I have like a 2 weeks-old baby, and I was like in the middle of like managing the baby, which is quite a big deal. And I just received an email that said your property was sold. You have nothing to do. The money is on the way to your bank account. It was a cash transaction, and that's it. And that's it, how it should be. And that's what we do. We save a ton of time for land investors, and we make the process so easy that you can focus on like growing your business or doing the things that you care really, but not the paperwork.
Yeah. And just to understand logistically, so let's say I've got my property. I want to sell it on Fabrica, but it's currently deeded in my name and the name of my company. So in order to get that queued up, do I have to fill out a deed and transfer it to a trust and then it's ready to go? So like I kind of have to do some groundwork first before I can put it into this system, or how does that work?
That's correct, but we take care of everything. So you go on the website, just type in the APN of your property or the street address, and we create all the documents, verify the title, and set up the trust instantly for you online. And then if it's in a state where we can use a remote online authorization, you would meet the notary directly online and sign it, and the property is ready to go. Otherwise, we would send you a notary to sign the deed. But yes, we take care of all that, and it's super streamlined. And regardless of a state, you get the link to sell the property right away.
Okay. And is there a cost for that pre-work?
Absolutely no. No, absolutely no. We take care of it.
Wow, it's pretty cool. See, whenever I hear people telling me like, "Oh, it's easy," like we take care of it all, I always have a hard time believing that because nothing is that easy. Like there's always gotchas and wrinkles and stuff that isn't really being told to you until you get into it and you're like, "Oh, okay, I see. So this is actually harder than I thought." So what I'm trying to do here is poke holes in this and see, okay, where are the problems? And as I was going through this, in my test transaction, I was the buyer, and I'm wondering, for somebody who is like, say, let me kind of reword that, to put this a different way, it sounds like this is a really good tool for the sell side when the real estate investor is selling their property to somebody else and their buyer is the one who's going to receive this link and go through the process. But if I'm on the buy side, say if I'm buying this from a motivated seller or somebody who responded to my direct mail campaign, because they would have to then get it into the trust, which I always just assume everybody I'm dealing with is incompetent and they can't do that. So is there an easy way for that to work, or is this more intended for the sell side of things?
It's a good question, Seth. So currently we are focused on the sell side. You're right. But we do have in our roadmap a solution for the acquisition too. So we want to make it easy not just to sell the property, but also to buy it from anybody out there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Seth, I've used it. So on the, as far as backing up a little, loading, like you said, I went through the acquisition process myself on a self-close, generated the deed, had a notary meet with the seller, they signed it, sent it back to me. I then logged into Fabrica, took the source deed grantor information, source deed, legal description, and loaded that in, and then Fabrica converted that from the warranty deed to the trust.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that, so that, a little bit of work on the front end, but it's all I did was provide those two things. And then they converted it to the trust for me. And then that provides the link. And as part of that process I went through, they have notarize.com,
Mm-hmm.
right? That they used as part of that. So that was initially, and I gave, candid feedback on that. That was initially kind of clunky, and that was nothing to do with Fabrica. It was also part B, right? The first time you're using that service, that notarize.com, the trust and the documents themselves, I'm not familiar with. The notary person was not familiar with it, but having been through it once now, after one or two as the seller, I now know what those documents look like, where the signature field should be. I'm more familiar with the process in loading a property and, converting it from a deed to a trust. Now that I've been through it once or twice, I'm familiar with it. But that very first one, that was my impression. Like you said, nothing's perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, as you're relying on other vendors, but they're, took my feedback. They've, certainly improved it, and it's obviously the acquisition side is a lot harder, right? Because on the sell side, everybody that finds your property, they are online already, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're looking on their phone, on the computer. They're savvy enough to at least have internet access.
Mm-hmm.
On the buy side, the acquisition, it's generally more elderly people or people that owned it for decades,
Mm-hmm.
may not have access to that. So that was my first question too. That's something that,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely put that on your roadmap, right? But I'm happy with right now. I know, I'm like, just get the sell side perfect, and then at some point, I'll harass you for the buy side.
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely, I think that on that side of things, it just saves so much time and human input, human involvement on the sales side.
Yeah.
For me, right when I started using it, I'm like, where were you guys 5 years ago?
Yeah, it is a big deal, and especially on the sell side. I mean, if there was any side that you wanted to make easier, it's the sell side, because that's where things usually get hung up anyway, right?
Yeah, well, and the buyers, they get all excited. They find a property online. They click buy. There's some back and forth, and then you say, all right, watch for your deed, and 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the county, right? It kind of takes the winds out of their sails, right? So the ability to generate the document, the deed, the trust electronically, digitally the same day, sometimes the property is their first purchase, right? So it's an emotional thing. So getting the deed the same day, that's one of the frequent asked questions is, when will I get my deed? How long does it take? How will I receive it? All these things, right? The digital title part of it removes.
Yeah.
And when you're working in multiple counties, each county's different, so there's a different lead time. So for me, it just it's streamlined. It's streamlined a lot of things, and the more transactions you're doing a year, the more that time saving scale, obviously.
Yeah, and I know when I first heard about this, one of the kind of like wah 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 moments I had, it was when I heard that this is only available. Is it in California, and was there another state that this works in?
We are now in California, New Mexico, and Arizona.
Okay, that's right. And then there's a plan to expand, was it into Texas and Florida and somewhere else soon, or?
Correct. We are working to launch in Colorado, Texas, and Florida.
Gotcha.
Next.
Okay. And it sounds like, just based on the importance of having online notarization, is that one of the holdups? Like, is that why this isn't just instantly available everywhere? Because not every place makes it this easy to get online notaries and that kind of thing.
No, honestly, I think it's more things. So when you look at each state has its own like rules and regulation and licensing, and there are quite some requirements there. And we want to make it right, to get it right. So we are going state by state to make sure that from a user perspective, the experience is the same. So they just use one platform, everything works the same way regardless of where the property is, more or less. While on our side, we take care of the complexity and regulation of each state. And that is something that we have learned by talking with people like Travis and so on. But most of the investors clearly use like templates or contracts that they fine-align, they're fine-tuning, and then they adopt it from one state to the other. And you discover that like some of those contracts were far from perfect or had issues. Like, while we have a full-time real estate attorney in the team working on the problem to make sure that it's done right.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know. That was something that I ran into. I think it was back in 2016 or 2017. I was trying to create this map of the US that would clearly say, in this state, this is the type of loan instrument you're supposed to use. And this is how the foreclosure process, just trying to make it like totally clear. So a person knows, no, I can't just take this Michigan land contract and start using that in California or Texas or something that's going to totally screw things up. So I wanted to explain that. And oh my word, it was a nightmare trying to get all that stuff figured out. I had to give up on it because I was getting to the point where I was trying to find attorneys and I was getting attorneys that would like contradict each other, like tell me different answers for one state. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm not even an attorney. Like, who am I to try to figure this stuff out? And it's very, very frustrating. So I know that's a big problem to try to solve that nationwide and just get the right thing in each place. So it totally makes sense that this isn't just snap your fingers and it works everywhere.
That was something initially where we just loaded the one or two loans I had in California because most of my business is in Arizona. So I was kind of impatiently awaiting for Arizona to get ready, sending emails back and forth. And it's like, oh, 2 or 3 more weeks, right,
Yeah.
for Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
But that was key too, because you're right. Also with us, even our business, what led me to mainly focus in Arizona initially was that all the counties use the same streamlined forms for, affidavits and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're right, stepping into different states. I had an issue or two in Colorado, which made me go, you know what, I'm just going to stick with my state where I can, streamline this. And I know I'm using a contract, but at the same time, I believe the states they've selected are probably the states with the most highest
Yeah.
land investor activity, right? Or
Yeah, for sure.
transactions.
Yeah, it sounds like sensible places to start. Absolutely. One random question I did have. So I know in my test transaction, at the very end of it, I see, okay, like you are now the owner of this trust. But it made me wonder, like, how does the municipality know where to send the future tax bills to? Because they don't have a
Mhm.
deed and they weren't notified of anything. So how does that
Mhm.
process work?
So behind the scenes, we do notify the tax assessor that you are the new owner of a trust.
Oh, okay.
So that's something that happened like in the backend. So we just send a form essentially to the county, providing them your name or your company name who as the ultimate beneficiary of a trust, and that's the way they know who to charge the taxes to.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we also take care of paying the property taxes for you. So that's something that
Yeah.
regardless in.
Yeah. And that, like, do I get like carbon copied at any of this stuff so I can see what's happening on my behalf? Because sometimes I've had enough experience with people who just don't do it right or don't know what they're doing
Mhm.
and they do it wrong.
Mhm.
Like, is there a way to see what's happening instead of just blindly trusting that it'll be taken care of?
Mhm. So each property has its own page on the platform where you can see all the documents. You can download them, and you also get a certificate of ownership that clearly states your name as the owner of a trust. So you can keep your hard copy, and you can use it also for legal purposes. That is legal validity to tell the world that you are the owner of a property. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to build on the property and so on, that is like the certificate that you want to use.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Do you see this like someday putting title companies out of business or anything like that? Or is it like what is it that a title company would do that this doesn't do, you know?
Well, I wish we can get to that point
Mm-hmm.
to basically become like competitors for title company or title insurance. I think
Mm-hmm.
that the main part to understand is that currently we don't provide title insurance
Mm-hmm.
for the properties on the system, but it's something we're looking into to do either together with some big name underwriter or possibly with a new completely different approach. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually you'll get to a point where the properties on Fabric are insured or assured so
Mm-hmm.
that you are safe. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing that we don't do yet,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's where we'll be focusing our efforts in the next year
Yeah.
and so.
Yeah. I was wondering when I was going through my little test transaction, there's a part where you have to put in, your legal name and your mailing address, like where your home is, like your residence, and your social security number and birth date. And why is that necessary? Like, who's to say a person can't just like make up whatever name they want and put that as the owner? Like, why is that? And I guess, and along with that, do people ever give you pushback? You're like, hey, what is this random link? I got to enter my social security number. Is that ever a problem or not so much?
Well, we are not hearing that much of pushback on the social security number.
Mhm.
Also, remember that our buyers and sellers are people that meet online, and they want the peace of mind to know that there's someone real on the other side of
Yeah.
of the screen.
Mhm.
So the fact that we verify the identity of each and every person on the platform provides that peace of mind.
Mhm.
And in any case, I mean, if they have additional questions on how we use the data and why, we have a pretty powerful customer support, so they can reach out to us using the chat, email, or even calling us, and we're happy
Yeah.
to help them.
Mm-hmm. And is there ever any confusion or hesitancy regarding the fact that they're buying a trust and not a deed? Are people ever like, huh? I don't get it. Is that ever a problem or not really?
Well, this is something we had to iterate on quite a few times, honestly, to communicate it in the right way. And what we say now is that you own the property through a trust, and you can do whatever you want with the property. So,
Mhm.
and again, we provide a certificate of ownership, but it's like the proof of ownership of a trust.
Mhm.
So once you explain people why and the fact that it's pretty simple approach, you do own the property and it's just wrapped into this trust instrument.
Mhm.
They do understand it and they see how easy it is to use it. They're fine with it. So
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that's something that, as the buyers of the property, and even myself, having, I've dealt a little bit with trust, but I had the same initial questions, and I've seen hundreds of deeds, right, and generated hundreds. So I had the same initial questions, and that was kind of mine was, hey, let's do some frequently asked question, like demo videos or something, right?
Mhm.
Because the seller is going to field those same questions over and over and over. What's the difference between a deed and a trust? Why am I getting a trust and not a
Mhm.
not a deed? So I think there's a very small number of questions that will come up, but it'll be the same recurring ones,
Mhm.
right? So as long as Fabrica has a good demo video or something that you can quickly point the buyer to
Mhm.
explain that, so that you're not manually having to explain that,
Mhm.
each time. I think that's helpful, because that it's certainly something that's can be confusing to people, because they think in terms of the very best is a grant deed or a warranty deed, and then a special warranty deed, and so on
Mhm.
and so forth.
Yeah.
They're kind of familiar with that. And then some people even go, oh, a trust, that's better, right? I have a beneficiary. I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay to put it into a trust or do a joint tenant type
Mhm.
deed or something. But then there's also a lot of people who just have no clue and no understanding, and being it's online, right,
Yeah.
might be concerned. So
Mhm.
I think if you just address those very few frequently asked questions that the buyers might have, and they're all fair, right? Because
Mhm.
they're the same ones I had, even being more familiar with it. But yeah, it's putting it in the trust is great, because with the beneficiary, for me, it's something I'd heard other investors were doing anyway prior
Mhm.
to Fabrica,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
With their properties, and allowed them to transfer it easier.
Yeah.
But it's just something I hadn't really dug into until I stumbled across
Yeah.
Fabrica.
Yeah.
Because early on, some of my questions, they're explaining the blockchain and Ethereum and the technology, and I'm like, okay, right? Yeah, on that side of things, I don't get it. But obviously, the customer or borrower doesn't have to deal with any of that. It's essentially a digital title, and I
Mhm.
think those words people understand and follow that, right?
Yeah.
The digital title and a trust.
Mhm. Is blockchain at work in this process? Is that what's going on?
yes, we don't usually pitch it, but
Yeah.
that's correct. So every single transaction under the hood is recorded on a blockchain. So
Mhm.
it's a way to make sure that uh, transactions are secured and
Mhm.
tamper-proof, how to say,
Yeah.
and transactions cannot be denied.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that word. I've heard it for so many years now, but like I just hear the words blockchain and I just like shut down. Like, okay, just out of my realm. I don't want to know about So it sounds like whatever the reason, it sounds like it's smart to not pitch that. um, so Travis, I know with the seller financing thing, so it sounds like you have brought over some existing borrowers to the system. What does that look like? And is that a pretty smooth process, or maybe you can walk us through the steps?
It is. No, it's been great. Like we talked a little bit earlier about transferring. So what happened, I currently had, the properties I owned were in my LLC via warranty deed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through the process with Fabrica of, going to the dashboard, putting in the grantor, information, my current information, the legal description of the deed, and then did the online notary and transferred them from the deed into the trust. And then at that point, Fabrica had, a canned or template email I could send out to the borrower with a link saying, hey, your loan's now being serviced by Fabrica. Click here to get your portal, get your account set up. And then that's the nice thing about it. I think that's one of the differentiating things with their product versus other, loan servicing specific to land. They actually have a team, a company of people, right, and support that to do some of the heavy lifting for you.
Mm-hmm.
So they do the correspondence. I generated the initial email with the link that said, hey, your account's being transferred, right? And they've taken it from there. And then they correspond by email, by phone, get the seller set up, get their payments in there. And then I just can log in and look at my dashboard or get my emails that your client's made an extra payment, right? I can export to CSV, bring that into QuickBooks.
Yeah.
So for me, what it's done, it's removed. And I had, sometimes you have your high maintenance, borrowers that you hear from more than others. And, I had one that was not really negative. They just were constantly making extra payments. It was and that's fine. That's great. Right. But each time I had to manually send an invoice because I didn't have a borrower portal or something.
Yeah.
And that's one of the loans we'd moved over. And she might make 2 or 3 extra payments a month, but it just reduced the back and forth. I'm at the kids' baseball game or something, right? And I get a text, hey, can you invoice me for $500? I want to pay extra. What's like, and I'm on my phone on QuickBooks trying to see the invoice. So it's things like that. I just check, is the account, in good standing? Are there extra payments? I log in and look, and it's completely removed the back and forth, like with this borrower specifically. And then the other borrowers, have a lot of questions. It's just removed that. And I think just providing a better experience to the borrower, having a client portal like any of us that have one with our, our mortgage, our car loan, whatever, versus lenders where we don't have that portal. It's a difference between having to pick up the phone and call somebody or text or, and just logging in and doing it yourself. So it's been huge for us. And I was even slowly in the last year, my wife and I are kind of moving away from seller financing just because just servicing our portfolio got so large that it started to almost be not only its own department, like a good chunk of the company, right? So I was kind of looking at changing our business model and focusing on cash only sales just because there's no maintenance to them, right? And but now it's a thing where I think I can balance both because there's so much less time that's going to be input into it and I can really scale. We generally do 30 to 60 transactions a year, and it's a lot of work, between my wife and I, but if I can kind of automate and streamline this, I've already got this seller finance thing down, wash, rinse, repeat. But if I now have a borrower portal on loan servicing company that's specific to land, that knows how to handle things, I can now focus on acquisition and cash sales and larger deals, right? And not be not have to fill the back and forth. It's just loan servicing is a high touch thing, a lot of back and forth on it, and they're taking care of that for me. So I was thrilled to stumble across them because I've tried a couple different products and we've done a lot of loan servicing ourselves over the years.
That's a nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and I just didn't find anything that, I just didn't find anything I was, that I was happy with. And I think some of the recent tools that have popped up in the last year or so in the land space of this being one of them have been a game changer for us.
Yeah, and it's actually a really huge deal because for land especially, like if you are willing to deal with the hassles of seller financing, it's just a huge selling tool and profit building tool and cash flow. And to say goodbye to seller financing, you're giving up a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you're
Well,
walking away from. And so if you don't
and
have to walk away from it, that's a big, what were you going to say? Sorry.
exactly. And the people that say, that, well, my property won't sell. Well, sometimes they're not offering seller financing, right? You obviously
Hmm.
open up to a way bigger buyer pool if you offer seller financing as part of it. And then it's just, you can spend yourself out of money too, right?
Yeah.
Selling everything. So there has to be a balance, of cash and terms
Hmm.
sales that you're doing, unless you come into the game with a big war chest of money, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but I also, yeah, I didn't want to say goodbye to it because I like the predictability of it, that,
Hmm.
recurring revenue.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm a fan of the passive income term, but the recurring revenue,
Yeah.
I'll call it.
Yeah.
It's more like gardening, right?
Hmm.
You plant these seeds, you grow the garden, and then it feeds you every month.
Hmm.
Whereas cash sales, it's more the hunt and kill, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
You're
good
out there
analogy.
hunting for cash sales, trying to generate money.
Hmm.
But if you have both going on, your terms, your loan servicing money can
Hmm.
fund your business, your marketing, and cover those other months where cash sales aren't really happening.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, with, I guess the mechanics of how it works varies depending on what kind of loan instrument you're using. But, given that you're selling a trust here in a seller finance deal, so when do they get the trust? Is it after they've made all the payments and that's when the transfer happens, or does it happen before and you can take it back? Like, what's the order of that?
So it currently mirrors what happens with land deals. So the trust is transferred at the end of a payment plan. So with the very last payment, you get the property automatically transferred to you.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And I know, like, one of the other hassles with seller financing is when borrowers just stop paying or they start paying late. Are there any mechanisms in place, like can you have a backup source of payment if one of them fails, or do like automatic notifications go out saying, hey, deadbeat, you missed your payment, hurry up? Like, what happens there in terms of late or missed payments, if anything?
Mm-hmm. So let me first say that since we automate the payments, all the payments are on auto pay basically.
Mm-hmm.
We are not seeing many cases of those. So it's usually pretty smooth experience. So the buyers simply get charged every month. And so there's no way he can forget about it because it just happens. So it's pretty rare or unusual to see missed payments for that reason. If for any reason the payment doesn't go through, there is a grace period and we try to resubmit to charge again the customer several times. And then after the grace period, we start like talking with the customer and see how we can readjust the payment plan. And eventually, if there's no way to do it, it goes into default and the property goes back to the seller.
Okay. And then I wonder if that's, I haven't done enough testing with this to know, but I wonder if that's a side benefit of having people use an ACH instead of a credit card, because a credit card is so much easier to just like, nope, cut it off, cancel the card. Whereas an ACH is like an actual bank account,
You're spot on. That's what I was kind of holding my breath waiting to say. That's exactly the case, because we have a number of people that, some do credit cards, some do that. And we've always found that I steered people towards ACH even prior to this, because I've obviously it's cheaper. They charge us less. So the more loans you have, the more you're saving if you have them on ACH versus credit card. But also, a lot of people if you're not running through a title company, you're buying land via seller financing. A lot of people, the income bracket they're in, some of them have prepaid credit cards, right? Like they load these credit cards and then they didn't have the funds on there in time, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're auto drafting from a debit card like that, right? So I think, because that was initially something early on, I said, hey, we got to be able to take credit cards, because a lot of my buyers do that. And that was just something I was kind of taught and had learned. And I thought, it's easier for them to check out through the website, was the main reason I had done that. But at the same time, as I've moved them and haven't found anybody with other than one or two, I'd say, that had an issue with moving to ACH, right? Moving to ACH, and it is way more reliable and way more stable. And it's one of those things I wish early on I had just, fought that battle and said, you know what, sorry, we only take ACH versus credit card. I was trying to be flexible and offer buyers
Hmm.
that, different options and less hurdles, but at the same time, people that have a checking account
Hmm.
are generally more reliable, and then you're getting a higher class of borrower, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It almost kind of begs the question. I mean, I know obviously we always want to make it as easy as possible to reduce barriers to selling something, but at some point, like, you gotta have some barriers. Like
Yeah.
you need to come to the table with something. You can't just like let anybody and everybody buy it and like, no, I'm only gonna pay you in pennies every month, and I expect you to
Well,
make that work. It's like, no.
well, exactly. And then you're dealing with, like you talked about, these late notices, right? Missed
Mhm.
payments.
Yeah.
Obviously, the smaller down payment you take and the more payment options you take versus ACH,
Hmm.
the higher your default rate, I think, is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, let's see here. Trying to make sure I'm not forgetting any questions that were running through my mind. Um, so Feta, I know you uh, said that you kind of learned a lot of stuff from working with sellers and trying to automate things. Have any I'm sure there probably have been lots of them, but what are some big lessons that you've learned since starting this company? And I don't know, like what comes to mind in terms of where do people make mistakes? How can they make things happen easier?
Well, I think the answer to this question, you have it in this podcast episode. I was listening to Travis while he was describing the process that he used to use to sell properties with seller financing. And you see more experienced or advanced investors basically have built their whole tech stack of tools that they use. They use Stripe for that, Moonclerk, and GeekPay, and
Hmm.
Asana, and you start to hear more and more names of tools over tools over tools, and
Hmm.
that is something that you're trying to automate something with a spaghetti sort of like
Yeah, for sure.
solution. I'm Italian, I'm allowed to say so, but it gets very hard and it's very easy to do something wrong and something can stop working because all of a sudden, you know what, your payment processor doesn't accept payments for real estate because it's not allowed by their terms and condition, and you have like maybe 100 plans that all of
Hmm.
a sudden you cannot get paid for, and what do you
Hmm.
do? No.
Hmm.
So what we have learned is that this approach doesn't work, so you
Hmm.
need to have something that takes care of everything from end to end, and that's what we do. And be careful in like trying to patch that thing
Hmm.
together by yourself because eventually something will just stop working.
Yeah. 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 It would be interesting to like that whole spaghetti analogy. Like it's very, yeah, that makes tons of sense. I can even see it in my head as I think of all the different software things we use. But it would be interesting to figure out, what parts can Fabrica handle and what parts can this CRM handle and what parts can this handle, and just try to like pare it down to the fewest number of things and platforms you have to log into on an ongoing basis, and just show a super simplified picture. Like this software handles this department and this handles this. Now, I don't know. That's the thing, because like there's different overlap. Like some software things will handle little parts of this and that, and I don't know. It'd be nice to have one place where it's all there and it's easy, and you don't have to be a genius to figure out how to use the software. Maybe someday we'll get there. I don't know.
We're
Well,
inching that direction.
Yeah, sounds like it. Cool.
yeah. Well, we try to cover everything that is not the marketing in a sense. So we think that like land investors should be spending their time in like finding new opportunities and new investments, and the buyers and market their properties. That's their job. And that's
Yeah.
what they like to do. And we want to enable them to do more and more of this and forget about all the
Hmm.
back end paperwork and so on. We take care of that.
And I know, like, now when I think of how much work must have gone into building this software to get it to where it is, and it's serving such a small niche market right now. Like, where's all the money coming from to do this? Is there some like group of investors who's paying for the software to this point, or like how has so much how have so many resources been devoted to building this up to the point that it's at?
So we are a venture-backed company. So there are venture capitalists who invested in the company and that are basically allowing us to build a solution for the real estate and to make real estate digital and programmable. So that's the vision for the company, is to make sure that in the future, every single real estate operation will be performed fully online and in a digital way. And investors believe in this vision.
Can I invest anything and take 50% ownership of the company or anything like that?
Yeah, well, we can talk about it after the podcast.
Well, Seth, that's what I was touching on earlier. Why this is a little different product than some of the others in the space, right? Is the support you receive, or that I receive, right, is not the same as some of the other ones where you've got one guy that was hired off Upwork, right, who's overseas, and he may or may get back to you within 72 hours of when you open a ticket, but for some reason he's never online when you click the chat or intercom button, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that this is a true company and a product, right, with a support team and real estate attorneys, and So yeah, I mean, I only moved one loan at first. I was hesitant myself, early on, because some of the other ones in the space that I've tried, I just really fell short.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was slow to move on this and very suspect myself. But I think what they're doing, they're also building it out, because they are backed and they're trying to do it right. They're building out one state at a time, and I think improving it and not using, like I did, land investing is kind of the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
A lot of cowboys out there, and I was getting the same way, right? Using the same contract, land contract in multiple states, just trying to streamline in my DocuSign process, right? And just bang out as many transactions a year as I could.
Yeah.
But then, the bigger you get, the more concerned you get with liability once you actually have a little bit to protect or lose.
You can't get away with that forever. That's for sure.
Yeah, you really can't. So it came at a good time for me, because we kind of needed to, once the business finally had legs or was well past that point, we needed to grow up, right, and start using, real contracts that were created by real estate attorneys, and not just something we threw together or used a template out of a course from several years ago or something, right? So.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I kind of appreciate about just what I'm hearing is the acknowledgement of the complexity in seller financing. It's something that so many people just like throw around like, oh yeah, just do seller financing. All your problems are solved. It's like, you're actually asking for a world of complication when you get into seller financing. It's not that simple. And if you don't have a way to like address those issues, it's like, I don't know.
Like accounting, they just say, oh, just get a good accountant, right? There's a lot more to it than that, right? When you're selling real estate, speaking of seller financing. But yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more to it that you got to unpack, and multiple gateway processors and, payment processors, payment gateways, just, like you touched on earlier with the spaghetti analogy, right? I mean, 5 or 6 different accounts I have, whether it's Stripe, QuickBooks, Heartland payment system, Moonclick, name it, all these different ones to try to duct tape together a solution that I think Fabrica is kind of it's kind of a all-in-one turnkey solution on the disposition or selling side, right? Obviously, it would be great if they move into the acquisition side of things as well. But this is such a game changer, just being on the selling side of it, that I'm happy with that.
Yeah, for sure. Feta, I'm curious, is the plan to like take this mainstream one day? So like, I don't know, like this will be used for a lot more than just land?
Yes, it is. So we started from land, we started from smaller properties. We are going up in terms of value of the properties. We'll get title insurance, and then we'll get into residential space. So the plan is to cover more and more of the real estate industry.
Yeah, and I know just looking at the pricing of it, I don't know if this pricing is going to change over time. Probably at some point it will, but it's kind of a no-brainer, just considering the cost of what it uses per transaction, if it's a cash deal, or per month if it's a seller finance deal. I mean, you could very easily charge, closing fees to your buyers to cover this stuff. So, I mean, it's almost like a no-cost thing in most cases, it seems like. And just given all of the things that it solves, I don't know. If you're in a state where it works, it seems like it's at least worth trying out just to see if it works for you. So,
Thank you, sir.
yeah. So are there any questions I should be asking that I haven't asked yet? Have we covered all the main things here?
I think we covered most of it. Travis, do you have anything that you think that you have noticed using the platform that you really liked and that you think that the world should know?
Well, no, I think I just tell people that are doing seller financing right now, sometimes, because I was at this point a while back when my wife and I serviced our loans, is you kind of look at your loan servicing fee, your monthly fee, and your document fee or closing fee as a profit center, right? And regardless how many transactions you close, let's say we were up to like 30,000 a year between closing fees and loan servicing fees. That may sound like a lot to somebody, but at the same time, that's a pretty low salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're constantly having to service these loans. So what I'm trying to say is you can pass on that cost and remove yourself from the business. So that closing fee, you're right. Most land sellers in the under 15,000 price point are charge a doc prep fee or a closing fee that'll more than cover Fabrica's fee if you're doing a cash sale. Or on a term sale, the monthly loan servicing fee, we charge like $19, I think, and I believe that's what Fabrica's priced at this point. So yeah, we're just passing that cost on to the buyer to pay for the, having the ability to have their own client portal. Yeah. And you truly are servicing the loan. We've always just charged that loan servicing fee, but all that meant was we'd respond to your email and let you make an extra payment or something. But now, borrowers really do have a client portal to service their loan. But instead of looking at the loan servicing fee and closing fee as a profit center, we now look at, Fabrica as a solution to remove ourselves and pass that cost on to the borrower so we can focus on, one big cash transaction exceeds your annual loan servicing fees right there. So if you can do one more deal, cash deal, because you've removed yourself from this part of it, that's huge. And that's the point we're at, where we're looking at products and services and processes that can remove us, from being part of the business, or at least, reduce our involvement, if not totally remove us.
Yeah. I used to work in a small business financing company. We had a few hundred loans on the books, and we had a full-time loan servicing person. Literally all they did was just service loans. So it's a big job. And in my opinion, it's not a fun job.
That's the main, if that brings you joy and that's your calling in life, so be it. Stick with it, right? But I actually started to, grow resentful every time I'd see an email or a text come in. It's like, what do you want? What do you need? Well, it's fair for a borrower to have a question or switch a card, right? The reality is when you have such a high volume of those coming in, so that's what it's done for me. Instead of, I wasn't loan servicing, I wasn't really providing great service because I didn't find joy in it. It was a nuisance, it was kind of I had to tolerate for the trade-off of having that monthly recurring cash flow. But this product allows me to remove myself and not deal with that client-facing side of it. That's not my strength. You got to stick in your area of genius, right? And for me, that's acquisitions and direct mail and buying more properties and researching new areas, not answering questions and loan servicing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I do have one last question for Feta. Who makes a better sports car, Italy or the US?
You can't put me on the spot like that.
or we could say spaghetti or pizza or anything.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's Italy for all the questions that you asked. Sorry.
I'm not going to argue with that. Cool. Well, thanks to both of you guys for talking with me. It's been very enlightening. I'm glad you guys reached out to me and let me know about what was going on. It'll be exciting to see where this goes over the next year and 2 or 3 years. And I think it's a valuable resource to at least know about, if not use. So appreciate it, you guys. And hopefully we can bring some more awareness to the world about what's going on here.
Thank you so much, Seth. It's been a very great conversation. Thank you for your time.
You bet. And if people want to go to the website, obviously, that is fabrica.land, LAND, and that'll bring you right there. And,
correct. Give it a try.
Yeah. Travis, is there anything you want to share if people want to reach out to you or check out your website or anything? You don't have to, but in case.
Oh, yeah. If they want to reach out to me, our selling website is landtownusa.com. We've been in business several years. And then we're also in the process of launching a site called connectedlandinvestors.com, also a Facebook page, just in its infancy, literally building it out this week, but to help new land investors and point them in the right direction, and also kind of fill that void of getting funding for your deals, or providing funding. But Seth, I did want to take a minute though to thank you, because it's several years, maybe, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, when I was just getting started in land investing, I actually reached out to you. At the time, I couldn't find courses. I had heard your interview on Bigger Pockets, and reached out to you, and you had responded to my email, and that was key to kind of the genesis of us starting land investing. And it was something that initially, early on, my wife and I always wanted to build a couple thousand a month, income on the side. And I mean, we've taken it, 20x that. And a lot of that was early on the foundation I built, consuming your free content, and you being willing to point me in the right direction, and, click reply on that email. It really is key. Several years later, we've got a land company that I'm proud of. So absolutely want to show gratitude.
That's awesome. Oh man, that really makes my day. And it's a good reminder of why I've been doing this for so long. So appreciate you emailing me. Was it back in 2014 or something? Or is that when you?
I think 2014 or 15 or something, when we were kind of dinking around with houses, and I was listening to Bigger Pockets, and heard you give a interview on land. And it kind of resonated, and then I went from there.
And luckily, that was one of those days when I wasn't dealing with a nasty seller financing. I didn't reply with, "What do you want?"
You were on your game. Yeah, exactly. You were servicing your own loans. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.